Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, March 25th, 2025, and our friend Colonel Larry Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Colonel.
Good to be with you, Nima.
Let's get started, Larry, with the way that Donald Trump and his administration they're talking about the situation between the United States and Iran. Here is what Pete Hegseth said on Fox News.
That number one, they want to talk, and number two, that it can actually lead to something concrete.
Well, Mark, it has to, and that's what President Trump is committed to. He has said very clearly, as you stated, unambiguously, Iran will not get a nuclear bomb under a Trump administration. Unacceptable, full stop, very clear. He said it, he'll keep saying it. Now, as we see with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, there's only one man on the planet, and this is true, this is not hyperbole, one man on the planet who could bring them to the table and forge a lasting peace. And he's doing that right now. We're in the process of doing that. That is unique to Donald Trump because he's strategically unpredictable, he's strong, he's clear, and he's respected on the world stage. I think the same is true in Iran. And we know the double talk of the Ayatollahs. You know it, you lay it out, I understand it. There have been secret, duplicitous moves for years and years and years. But we're at a moment under this administration where President Trump is giving them an offer. He is saying, now is your chance to come to the table and completely give up and dismantle your program. Let's talk. I'd prefer to talk rather than do anything else. At the same time, he is ensuring that at the Defense Department and across our military, we maintain all capabilities necessary to work with our partners, to, if we have to, and we don't want to, but if we have to, prevent Iran from gaining nuclear capabilities. So he's clear. The position is clear. Iran understands their options. There's never been a more serious leader atop the United States of America. There's a very serious leader atop the state of Israel. There's a clear message that Iran cannot get a nuclear bomb, and we are prepared to enforce it.
Yeah.
Nima, listen to the hyperbole. This is a rank amateur. Listen to the hyperbole. Quote, there's never been a more serious leader atop America. That includes Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Dwight David Eisenhower, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and a host of others who were pretty good leaders. He's a rank amateur. And let's talk about duplicity. What did the United States do after allying itself with Europe, Germany, the Permanent Five, and creating the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with treaty force in everyone else's mind, including President Biden, really? Maybe not the Senate, but definitely President Biden. And what did Trump do? He left that agreement which had curbed any possibility for at least 25 years of Iran's getting a nuclear weapon. He left it, just summarily left it, violating international law, violating his agreement with all those other parties, violating his agreement with the UN Security Council. Hegg said, do a little research. Get your act together. Don't act like a fool every time you stand up. And oh, by the way, Petey boy, let me tell you about your armed forces. Let me tell you about how they would get whipped if they tried anything against Iran. Whipped, beaten. And oh, by the way, Petey, do you know there's a fatwa out that a foreign minister from Iran looked me in the eye and in perfect English said, would you like us to operationalize this fatwa? That's a good word, isn't it? He knew I was a military professional. Operationalize, that's a good English word, isn't it? We'll go to the UN and operationalize it, sign it in blood in front of the Security Council. We do not want a nuclear weapon. It is anti our religion to have a nuclear weapon. What Petey and Donald are doing, contrary to what he just told that idiot at Fox News, they're forcing Iran into a position where it might have to, regardless of its religious inhibitions, go ahead and develop a nuclear weapon. But I can tell you right now, Neiman, there is no way the United States military can carry out the threat that Petey just said. And one of the things I learned serving Colin Powell and H.W. Bush, who was as good a president as we've had in the post-World War II era, Petey, H.W. Bush, got that? Petey. One of the things they knew was not to make threats that you couldn't make good on.
the situation, Larry, with Yemen and the way that they're trying to, we talked it before coming up on live, we talk about the way that the United States is attacking Yemen. Do you think it's a way to intimidate Iran? That's why they're doing this? Or is that related to the situation between Israel and Palestine? How much of importance does it have? Is that, how do you evaluate that?
It's difficult to evaluate it because, as Petey said, I'm going to call him Petey from now on, just like I call Victoria Nuland Nudge. Petey said, this has everything to do with Iran, but it has everything to do with Israel, because why did the Al-Ansar Houthis, why did they start up again? They made it perfectly clear why they were doing what they were doing in the Red Sea. It was because of the treatment of the Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere. That's why they started up again, because look at what Netanyahu has done. I was just looking at Haaretz this morning. You know, this is despicable. Israel has struck in Syria again and killed some people in Syria. But here's the most despicable thing. This just came out. This is the HRC's 58th session, and a report entitled, quote, listen to this title, quote, "More than a human can bear, colon, Israel's systematic use of sexual, reproductive, and other forms of gender-based violence since October the 7th, 2023. The Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, finds the following." It's despicable. And that's the reason Al-Ansar, the Houthis, are doing what they're doing. And they've said that. They've been explicit about that. So if you want to stop the Houthis from doing what they're doing in the Red Sea, which is very effective, it's killed the port of Eilat, for example, absolutely killed it. It's very effective. Maritime insurers aren't insuring, and many shippers aren't shipping. And the Red Sea, the last time I got a briefing on it, about 7 or 8 years ago, at that place Donald Trump closed down, U.S. Institute of Peace, by the military, who was using the USIP to do a tabletop war game. The briefing I got was 50 to 60% of the world's commerce regularly passes through the Red Sea, far more important than the Persian Gulf. That's what we've done. That's what the empire has done. It's caused all that additional cost for people shipping because they can't ship through the Red Sea. And we aren't doing anything really significant to open it back up. If we were, insurers would insure and shippers would ship. I'm very familiar with that. Very familiar with that. When we did in January 2009, the petroleum disruption exercise in the financial district in Beijing, we had maritime insurers there. We had Lloyd's of London there and others. We had maritime shippers there. We had the U.S. Shipping Council there. We did some things in that simulation with the Chinese, the Koreans, the Japanese, and others that disrupted oil flow. People quit shipping. Oil went to $300 a barrel. Well, we're looking at that sort of situation right now in the Red Sea because the military might of the United States cannot prevail against this group of people in Yemen. I don't care what Petey says, and he can bomb the place to pieces. He's not going to stop them. The only way you would stop Al-Ansar is to mount the peninsula there, as it were, by the Bab el-Mandeb or wherever. You'd have to go ashore somewhere, the port of Hodeidah or wherever. The Saudis wouldn't do it, and invade. That's the only way. And that's the only way you're going to take Iran down too and ensure it doesn't have a nuclear weapon. And I guarantee you, Nima, as I've said many times before, that's a 10-year war, $3-4 trillion, 100,000 casualties. And at the end of it, it'll look sort of like Iraq or worse. So what are we talking about? Please tell me. You tell me. What are we talking about? Who are these people who are running this empire now? Who are these people? Petey says Trump has this power of strategic indecisiveness. That's a power for a power like the United States to be strategically indecisive, to have all the leaders in the world trying to figure out where you're going next. It's a great way to get rid of your allies and friends and a great way to please your enemies, ultimately. Steadfastness. Powell used to say that. Steadfastness. He also would quote Thucydides all the time. Only one passage did he quote from Thucydides. And I never saw him put anything under the glass on his desk except this passage. And it says in English, restraint is that aspect of power men admire most.
Larry, what I do see in the Trump administration is this. I don't know what is the grand strategy on their part, but you see everyday actions to make some sort of reactions in Russia, Iran, in the Middle East. These are daily based sort of strategy and tactics. It seems that they're trying to learn the behavior of the other party by implementing these sort of, I don't know, once they said that they're gonna, the way that they're treating Iran, the way that they're not communicating to Iran. If you see what Witkoff said in his interview with Tucker Carlson, he literally said, we didn't talk with Hamas.
Yes.
So if you're serious in the sort of negotiations that you're doing, you have to talk with both parties to bring it to some sort of sanity. How you can talk with one party and the other party is not that much important to talk with.
Well, the other party is even subhuman. That's the way they look at it. They look at it the same way Bibi Netanyahu looks at it. They're subhuman, even though they're all Semites and they're brothers and sisters. It's a nonsensical situation. But you just put your finger on one of the greatest weaknesses of this administration. It doesn't study. It doesn't look at history. It doesn't think that's important. It thinks it has such a surfeit of power that it doesn't need to study. It doesn't need to understand its friends and its enemies. It doesn't need any of that. It just uses brute power, whether it's sanctions or military force or the threat of both. That's what their whole recipe for diplomacy, I don't even want to call it diplomacy, for international relations is. That's what Hegseth just described in that kind of diatribe on the White House lawn, I think he was, to the cameras. He just said, we don't need to study people. We don't need to understand people, enemies or friends. We don't need to do any of that because our power is so great that if any of them offend us, we will bash them. And they better not try to do anything that will cause us to bash them, like build a nuclear weapon.
Larry, here is what Witkoff said about Iran in his latest interview, as I've mentioned, with Tucker Carlson.
With that all said, he wrote that letter. And why did he write that letter?
For people who aren't aware of the letter, can you just roughly describe what it said?
It roughly said, I'm a president of peace. That's what I want. There's no reason for us to do this militarily. We should talk. We should clear up the misconceptions. We should create a verification program so that nobody worries about weaponization of your nuclear material. And I'd like to get us to that place because the alternative is not a very good alternative. That's a rough encapsulation of what was said, roughly. And the president has said that. He's said that, so I'm not telling you anything's top secret or anything of that sort. The Iranians have reached back out. And I'm not at liberty to talk about the specifics, but clearly through back channels, through multiple countries and multiple conduits, they've reached back out. I think that it has a real possibility of being solved diplomatically, not because I've talked to anybody in Iran, but just because I think logically it makes sense that it ought to be solved diplomatically. It should be. I think the president has acknowledged that Iran, that he's open to an opportunity to clean it all up with Iran, where they come back to the world and be a great nation once again.
Larry, the way that he's picturing, somehow it seems so much understandable. But when you see the reality of what Donald Trump and his administration is doing, do you think, are we getting the same sort of feeling, the way that they're behaving?
Well, Witkoff is one of the members of the administration, and you just saw it there, who at least is a mild-mannered gentleman, apparently. Now, I know his reputation as a real estate guy, but he's a New Yorker after all, or I think he is. But here again, you're looking at a vast ignorance, and you can parse that ignorance even as he speaks. And whether he feels the same way about knowing his enemy, as I just described, you ought to in order to do good diplomacy, I don't know. But it's pretty clear from what he said there, even though it was mild-mannered and it seemed explicable, it seemed like a smart thing to say, and on the surface it was, demonstrated an ignorance. Most potently towards the end, where he says Iran can come back into the world and be a nation again. Dude, Iran is already in the world, already 90 million strong, already a nation, already fought a brutal 8-year war with Iraq that it was winning and would have probably marched into Baghdad had it not been for the United States throwing its weight behind the UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire and a peace, and making sure it threw its weight behind Saddam Hussein as well, having backed both sides during the war like a seesaw during the course of the 8 years. This is a country with a history of one of the most powerful empires in the history of humans on this earth. And you're talking about bringing them back into the world? What is your prerogative to bring them back in the world? Now, I know he's ignorant, and I don't use that derisively. I know he has not studied the country. He is not versed in Persian history. He's not versed in Southwest Asia. He's not versed in anything but New York real estate primarily. That's all I can conclude. But this is not the way you do business. I like his manner. I like the way he's very calm and he uses good English and he describes things like in the immediate moment they might seem to be. But think about what he's saying with regard to the JCPOA too. You already had an agreement. Iran is looking at the United States of America as a state in the state system, however much it might disgust them to do that. And it says to itself, we made an agreement with you. We don't care who's president now or who was president then. We made an agreement. It was signed, sealed, and delivered with some of our blood. And we made it with the Europeans, the Russians, the Chinese, the Security Council. My God. And you're trying to tell me you're going to bring us back in the world if we do another deal with you? Why on earth would we think that you would stick to that deal? Why would we not conclude that 4 years down the road, 3.5 years down the road, oh, you're going to be an autocrat and stay in office? Well, tell us that, and maybe we'll think differently. I mean, this is so flawed, so majorly flawed. But let me come to what I've been saying all along many times. Trump wants a deal. Trump wants a deal. He wants to throw that deal up into the face of the Biden administration, and he wants to say it's a better deal, and he got it. And he will work exactly the way Witkoff was describing there, probably in a far more mercurial character as he does it, but he will work for a deal. He will try to get a deal. I believe that. I think that's true, and that would be good. But the Iranians are going to have to go, man, a second guy. We've done it a second time. I hope this one holds. And one would wonder if it would. Now, let's just shift gears and go to Ukraine. And this approach is not going to work. This approach is simply not going to work. You don't know what you don't know. And as Rumsfeld used to say, and Witkoff or whomever might be involved in this so far has demonstrated that this is going to be far more difficult because the Russians are not the Persians. It's just that simple. And the Russians have been fighting a war, lost a lot of people, shed a lot of blood, and won. And they think they're going to take this same kind of approach, making a deal for the deal maker Trump to Ukraine, which seems to be like they're thinking, going to be a disaster. And that, to me, unless we make the stupid decision to actually try to take Iran down, which I don't think we will. I just don't think the Pentagon will let that happen. Unless that happens, Ukraine is far more serious now with the fact that I don't think they know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing here either. But here, the circumstances are conducive. the Iranians do know what they're doing. So the circumstances are conducive to Trump getting a deal. They're not so conducive on the other frontier, though. And this is very disturbing. And the other aspect of it is, Israel is making war right now on three things. They're making war on their democracy, and that may very well produce a civil war. They're making war on Jews of the type that came to Israel and formed the state in the first place, because they don't want them anymore. They don't want those kind of Jews. Those kinds of Jews are too liberal. They're too much for democracy. They don't want those. What they want is Ben Gvirs. They want little Ben Gvirs, tons of them. So they're making war on the immigration, if you will, that might result into Israel once this is settled in some way. I'm not even sure there'll be too many European Jews that want to come. Maybe the Smotrich and Ben Gvir types will want to come. And then the third thing they're doing is essentially destroying what's left of any semblance of a state in Israel. And of course, I should throw a fourth one in there. They're back to killing massively again. I was reading actually looking at some of the plans for North Gaza, what they're going to do in North Gaza, what they're going to do south of the Nazarene corridor, and then what they're going to do all the way to Rafah once again. It's just a repetition with even more killing and more destruction of what they did in the first few months of the war. It's phase two. And Netanyahu had absolutely no plans on going to a second stage of the ceasefire and no plans on getting the other hostages out. And this is going to make the civil war, if it happens, even more vicious and more terminating of the state of Israel. So that's a long-winded way to do it, but these things are wrapped together. Al-Ansar, the Houthis, Ukraine, Israel, Syria, they're all wrapped together because this is part of the empire's desire to create that arc of instability from the Arctic Ocean to the Antarctic, principally now from the Baltic through Ukraine, down to the Levant, and now into Syria, that they think will stop the erosion of power from west to east. Ultimately, they believe, I think, that they are going to have to bring China into some kind of deal like Witkoff was talking about with Iran, and Trump is going to be the deal maker of the century there and get his Nobel Peace Prize. Thank you very much. But I think they're going to they're going to meet Armageddon there. I really do. And this arc of instability that they're preparing to try and halt the seepage of power, if you will, from the west to the east is going to cause that to happen, because we're looking at the only way the U.S. is going to fight any of these entities, Russia, China together, Russia alone, China alone, Iran with them all, or Iran backed by Russia. The only way they're going to fight them is with conventional forces initially, and they're going to lose. And that means they're going to go nuclear. So we're looking at the number one nuclear power in the world, who's the only power in the world that's used nuclear weapons against human beings, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945, killed 100 to 150,000 of them. Only power that's ever done that, being the only power to resume it. That's where it inevitably leads, this strategic approach that is so broken and being implemented by such rank amateurs. That's what it's leading to. Biden started it, though, and Trump has taken it over, with all the promise to do otherwise. And I'm all for him if he can do otherwise, rank amateur or not, strategic indecisiveness or not. I'm all for him. But I'm telling you, I'm checking my bets.
Larry, by the way, it seems that Iranians, I talked with Professor Marandi, he said that when it comes to Iranian, on the part of Iranian, when they look at the behavior of Trump 2.0, so what?
I like that. It fits Elon Musk's image. What is Elon Musk, 3.5?
You look at NAFTA, you look at the ceasefire between Israel and Palestinians. So how can they believe that the Trump administration is honest the way that they're behaving, the way that they're asking? On the other hand, if they want to negotiate, what they're putting a lot of pressure on Iran, new sanctions, new sort of pressure, and they're doing the same, by the way, Larry. You've mentioned Ukraine. If they want to negotiate, if they want a ceasefire in Ukraine, what are they sending intelligence and weapons to Ukraine? There has to be some sort of limitation for this sort of behavior. You cannot play with them. We are honest the way we're behaving, but we want to provide your enemy the way we feel that would weaken your position. You have,
And they're putting, I think, in an tactical operational sense, they're putting Odessa at risk. And putting Odessa at risk puts any kind of rump state of Ukraine, neutral or otherwise, at risk. Because to lose Odessa is to lose your access to the ocean, to the Black Sea. And I don't think Russia would surrender that access if it had once taken it. And as I've told you before, I think, anyway, if I remember, I do so many of these, I can't remember whether I told you or someone else. But this would be a securing of the Black Sea, probably in a way that the Russian Navy and the Russian military in general, in particular, would salivate over. Because the Black Sea had become a place where we sailed pretty much anytime we wanted to and threatened Russia whenever we wanted to and however we wanted to from the sea. It'd be very difficult to do that if they own the entire coastline with any suggestion that you ever could fight and be victorious. You would lose. And that's becoming the case for the world's greatest Navy faster and faster. Whether you're looking at the Red Sea and our carrier groups, or you're looking at the general ability of the United States to enforce freedom of navigation in vast waters far from the Atlantic coast or the Pacific coast, you're seeing a degradation of our capability that is significant. I mean, this is not known by the average American. Recently, the Congress was so stupid that and I hope they're going to restore and reverse this. They actually passed some of the money for Virginia-class submarine repair parts and maintenance, and they're getting old. They need the repair parts and they need the maintenance. They passed it away to future high-tech systems. So they took that money away from the Virginia-class submarines and sent it over there. That threatens not only our security, as I'm describing here, but it also threatens the lives of those sailors in those boats. This is how badly led the empire is right now in all branches of government. You would never do that if you had any consciousness of what Virginia-class submarines represent to our national security capability. But they don't. They don't. I suspect Hegseth doesn't either, the Secretary of Defense. If you're going to do these kinds of things and make these braggadocio remarks about Iran will never have a nuclear weapon and we're going to take the Houthis down, you are really endangering the American Republic, such as it is, the American empire, your own standing. You're really treading on thin ice. And we're doing it every day now, every day. And I can't see that Trump and Hegseth and others in the administration, the Waltz, for example, I can't see that they understand how truly weak we are militarily. And what they're doing is making us weaker, not stronger. This is a recipe across human history for 3,000 years in one way or another for the disintegration of empire. It doesn't make any sense unless you're saying, okay, history says all empires do this. We're doing it. We're going to disappear. The problem there, Nima, the huge problem is no empire in human history has ever had nuclear weapons. None. Nada. Nil. Not a single one. De rien, as the French would say. We do. Several other countries, 8 other countries do too. We have the ability to destroy human civilization and ourselves with it. That makes us disappearing from the scene. That makes us collapsing. That makes us turning into a joke very serious, very serious.
Larry, it seems that the way that Russia is talking right now, the way that Donald Trump is just continuing these negotiations, they talk in Saudi Arabia again. Do you think that the way that, on the other hand, you see Zelensky is doing whatever he wants to do? I don't know who's running the show in Ukraine.
Starmer, Macron, and Merz soon. They're running the show.
Is the Trump administration concerned about what they're doing?
They have to be if they're thinking, but then again, I have to say, as I've alluded to earlier, they're not thinking. It's almost as if they have stovepipe these things. You know, Ukraine's here, Houthis are here, Iran is here. Maybe there's a couple other things I'm going to talk about. There's Japan and Korea in the other direction. Yeah, we got to go there. I don't see that there's any strategy that puts it all together. I don't see any strategy at all other than Trump's quest for a Nobel Peace Prize. That's another reason why the Iran nuclear deal might be concluded on Trump's watch. He covets this. He lusts for a peace prize because Obama got one. A black man. Ooh, Petey, how does that make you feel? A black man got the Nobel Peace Prize. The only black president America's had got a Nobel Peace Prize. That irritates some of these people because fundamentally some of these people are white supremacists. I don't put Petey Hegseth too far from that category either. So, you know, all of these things are impacting, which should not be impacting American foreign and security policy now. These people are rank amateurs. That's the only way I can look at it. And that includes Waltz. It includes Witkoff, though he's a mild-mannered man, and I kind of like him. That includes Trump himself. It includes Hegseth. It includes almost everyone in the administration. It includes Bondi, the whole group. They are rank amateurs.
Larry, there is an article in Italian, in this Italian newspaper. It says Corriere della Sera.
Yes, know that. I know that
Yeah.
well. It's one of its editors, and I talk a lot.
In this article, they say if Ukraine rejects peace agreements between Russia and the United States, and Ukraine being part of it, it shows the map of Ukraine. How can it go? Russia would include Kharkov and Dnipropetrovsk, Nikolaev, and Odessa. And it goes all to Kiev. And it's unbelievable, Larry, that you look at the way that the Biden administration was incapable of making some sort of agreement. And right now, Trump is just, I don't know what they're doing and how powerful are they in terms of forcing Europeans. But it doesn't seem that it doesn't seem that much easy that Donald Trump was talking about.
No, and I think, you know, what I've said before, and I said this yesterday in Berlin, there are not representative governments in Europe right now. So whatever and by that I simply mean the governments in power at this moment in most of the European countries that count, do not represent the majority of their people. And that's a combination of things. It's the political system they have, Germany. It's the regime they have, Macron. I don't know about Britain. Britain seems to me to have lost its way. Not Britain, but England seems to have lost its way. So you're looking at an almost eruption that's going to take place when that settles, when we do get governments in Europe that represent the majority of their people. The first thing those governments are going to have to respond to is, if it actually takes off, is this increased spending on defense, because that's going to be absolutely negative for their fairly luxurious social programs. And that people are going to object to that majorly. The second thing they're going to have to look at is, does what these governments that are in power right now working principally for the United States, but rebuffed by Trump, as it were, and now working for themselves, but on the same kind of agenda for which they do not have the resources. I asked yesterday, propensity to serve in the United States right now is about 9%. What's it in Germany? What's it in France? So you're going to build all these things. You're going to increase your expenditures. Who's going to fight for you? Do you have higher than 9% propensity to serve in your 18 to 24-year-olds? Look at Ukraine. What's the greatest deficit Ukraine has? People power, people on the front lines, people to fight, people to do the grudge work of infantry, despite all this high-tech stuff. It's Ukraine's greatest deficit. Jake Sullivan even said this in a moment of truth. Ukraine, after all, doesn't have the manpower to match Russia. Well, you're going to build all these systems maybe, and you're going to increase your spending. Have you checked with your 18 to 24-year-olds? Are they going to be conscripted? Are they going to join your armies that are going to fight people that don't want to fight you, but you're going to make them want to fight you, Russians in particular? These are questions Europeans haven't asked themselves. And von der Leyen at the EU, she's just a warmonger. And so is most of the EU. This is going to go. It's going to wash away. And then you're going to be looking at a totally different Europe. And my concern there is that not only will we have severed the transatlantic link, and not only will we have no real people in Europe with whom we can deal on a daily basis, we'll have governments that detest us, governments that hate us because we will have done this to them. And you're going to see a whole new relationship across the Atlantic. I don't think that's good. I think it might not be good simply because if Europe does, over a decade or two, develop its own security identity, and it's a fractured and disparate security identity, what is the history of Europe in that regard? Fighting one another. So we're back to the past in terms of history. People aren't thinking about these things. They're not thinking ahead of their nose. They're not thinking ahead of next election or next year or whatever. They need to start thinking about the future. They need to start thinking about a robust security architecture that I keep saying has to include Russia for Europe. There's no reason why that has to be divorced from the United States. It wasn't the plan in 1991 and 92 and 93 when we had sane people in charge in Washington. The plan was to have Russia and Europe together. And then would we even be worried about Russian gas? Would we even be worried about Russia going with China? You know, Russia has a decision to make, as it always has had throughout history. It can go either way. It's in both camps. It's such a vast country, 11 time zones, such a vast country. It's half in Asia and half in Europe. And it can make a decision. And we're forcing it to make a decision to go with the eastern half. That's the way power's moving. And if I were Russia, I would probably think seriously about more of my attention being that way than the other way. But that's not Russia's want. Russia wants to look towards the West. It wants to be a part of the West. And we're the ones who've rebuffed them, we in Europe. We need to stop that. But how do you get there from where we are right now? You don't through the methodologies of Trump.
Here is what Witkoff said, Larry, in terms of the difficulties they're having with Europe.
I can bet.
I think he's speaking to realistic, clear-eyed people who can, who have the welfare of Ukraine in mind.
So without getting into names,
yeah,
I've talked to multiple European leaders, and I've said to them, the more you encourage him not to be proactive at the peace table, the more you suggest that aid will continue without any conditions attached to it. No one says that we shouldn't aid Ukraine today or in the reconstruction later on, but it's got to come with certain conditions. If we're going to give a lot of money to Ukraine, we want to hear the business plan of how this is going to get resolved, because it's an unsustainable business plan if they don't have a plan for how it gets resolved. We just can't forever give money because they'll get ground down. And ultimately, and this is, we've discussed this in the administration. Ultimately, what you can't have here is risk of any kind of nuclear action, even a tactical nuclear action. I mean, even if it's not a big bomb explosion,
doesn't matter.
Just a tactical nuke would take stock markets down all over the world.
Well, they haven't been used in 80 years. They've been used exactly twice in human history.
You can't allow it to happen.
It's not a precedent you want at all.
And while I think we have to get a fair deal for Ukraine, we cannot allow that country to drag us into World War III. And that's not my policy. That's President Trump's policy.
Yeah.
Listen to the language. Again, I like his manner. I like his calmness. He actually speaks in complete sentences. He speaks good English, but he's a businessman. He's a businessman, and everything he conceives is businesslike. That's not necessarily bad for a government official, but it is weakness in diplomacy, because business looks for profit. Business looks at things in a very different way than a diplomat looks at things. Powell and I used to talk about this a lot because there was a great pressure on the George W. Bush administration to be more businesslike, typical Republicans. A diplomat is looking at the entire scene that he's surveying and he's trying to conduct diplomacy in as a place where profit has no writ. You may lose majorly in terms of business. Listen to what he says. What's the reaction to a nuclear weapon? The stock markets would plunge. My God, man, hundreds of thousands of people would probably die. If not the human race, if it went strategic. That's the businessman's approach. That's not the diplomat's approach. The diplomat has to think not in terms of profit, but in terms of the interest of his country, the interest of others, especially his allies and friends, and ultimately the interest now, when you're talking nuclear weapons, of the globe. Business parameters do not work. Profit and loss aren't part of the game. The game is existential. The game is serious. Now, I like the way he talks. I like his manner, but I talked to the European leaders and I told them that, they can't keep supporting him if we want him to be a reasonable person at the peace table. Well, what are you talking about there? You're talking about a business transaction. The business transaction is not the model you want to use. The diplomatic parlance and conversation is the language you want to use. Very different. I know it's hard to grasp that difference when America's forte, if you will, is business, and Trump's certainly, although I hesitate to say that because Trump's forte is debt, not business. It's debt. It's almost Alexander Hamiltonian in the sense that, boy, if I build up a huge amount of debt, I can live off of it for my whole life. That's a hell of a way to look at business, but it's the way Trump looks at it. And I don't think Witkoff's that way, but that's a hell of a way to look at Ukraine. We built up this humongous debt. We have a humongous debt. And now we're going to live off of it. Okay, that's not the way you're going to do a deal with Vladimir Putin. The way you're going to do a deal with him is essentially recognize what I'm saying about effective diplomacy. You're going to give him virtually everything he has won with blood. And then you're going to make it look like, as best you can in the English newspapers, the Western newspapers, as a good deal that you did for not just yourself, but Europe and the world. And maybe some of the language he used there about nuclear weapons and so forth would be potent in that regard. But you've got to treat it not as I'm going to go make a profit. You got to treat it as I'm going to take a huge, in Ukraine and Israel too, for that matter, I'm going to take a huge loss, but that loss is worth it for what I'm going to achieve. And I can handle that loss because I'm a good diplomat and a good politician, and I can explain it. That's how you're going to do it. Think about, for example, the crisis in April of 2001 with China that Colin Powell handled and solved. The ultimate solution to that crisis diplomatically worked out with Chen Shih-chen who knew America better than any other Chinese at the time. He's dead now. Wang Yi is very much his successor, though. Powell worked out the deal to where, and this sounds basic, but it's fundamental to diplomacy, where an apology would be rendered in Chinese by the Chinese by us, and an apology would be rendered by us in English to the English-speaking audiences. So we would apologize in one language, they would apologize in the other language, saving most of the shame, if you will, on both sides, and coming to an equitable conclusion that got our airplane and our 24 service members back, and satisfies China with regard to having killed one of their best pilots in the F-8 that collided with the EP-3. No one won, but everyone won.
Larry, in terms of the bigger picture of the United States foreign strategy, the strategy they're having in terms of competing, this, as you mentioned, the competition between the East and the West, how does that fit? How Russia and Iran fit in that picture? How do they want Iran and Russia to be? Do they want Iran and Russia to be on the Chinese part? Do they want Iran and Russia be in the middle? Do they want Iran and Russia being closer to the United States? I would wonder what is the understanding of the Trump administration.
I don't know, Nima. I can't parse it. I can't find what the understanding is because different voices seem to say different things. I think it's fair to say, given the relationship with Iran since 1953, particularly since 1953, before that, with Howard Baskerville as a missionary in Iran and all manner of things, the relationship was pretty solid, I think, mainly because Iran looked at the United States as a representative of democracy, of the end of colonialism, and all the positive things that we looked at ourselves through the mirror of. Falsely sometimes, but nonetheless, we were very much a part of that image in the world. We were not Britain. We did not bring colonization to you. We stripped you of your colonization in World War II, for example. So after World War II, the Iranians looked at us as the most positive force in the world. Indeed, a lot of Iranian youth still do. If you look at the polls, they still do. They think we're the best force for, anti-colonialism and freedom and treating states as equals. But 53 did a real damage to that, the coup in 53 and pushing Mossadegh out. Because whatever you might think of Mohammad Mossadegh, he was representative of Iranian democracy. And we pushed him out. We kicked him out. So then comes the revolution, and we still have a bone in our throat about the revolution and what happened with, kicking us out and taking the hostages for 444 days. And then Eagle Claw afterwards, when we lost our airplane and helicopter, and really a farce for Jimmy Carter. Those things have created a relationship that the United States simply can't deal with. It simply can't deal with. It detests Tehran in its visceral consciousness. It detests Tehran. And I've been amongst these people who detest Tehran. That'll take a long time to work out, a very long time to work out. And any kind of nuclear deal is going to take a long time to help that be worked out. It could be worked out. All to say that what's happening right now, Nima, is exactly what I was just describing about this power going back to the east through Central Asia, magnet is China. Russia's got to make a decision. We're going to compel Russia to make a decision to ally with China. We're going to compel them to do that, either through Iran or through Ukraine or through both or through Israel. Have you been listening to Putin's statement about what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza? He's been vitriolic about it, and he's gotten more and more vitriolic about it. And I don't blame him, because the pontificating of Washington about its great international system in the world, its rules of law and such, is totally negated by what Netanyahu is doing in the Levant. And Putin and Erdogan was picking up on that for a while, but Erdogan's in deep trouble himself politically in Turkey now, so he's got to worry about that. He's trying to arrest the mayor of Istanbul, who's his biggest opponent probably. So here's another strategic error of the first magnitude. We're going to compel Russia to, for the first time in 300 years or greater, since Catherine anyway, to make a decision to go eastward. They don't want to, but we're going to compel them to, either through Iran. They'll have to back Iran. They will back Iran, Nima. They have to live up to that agreement. They will back Iran. I don't know how fully and completely, but they will back Iran if we attack it. So that's another thing for Petey to worry about, and Donald to worry about, and all the rest of them to worry about. We're going to compel Russia to not only flow with the power change, but to make themselves a huge component of that power change and against our interests. This is what is so idiotic about what Biden started.
Larry, do you think that in terms of security, how important is the relationship with Iran and Russia? You mentioned that Russia would back Iran in any sort of event that if the United States attacks Iran. But Russia, we know that Russia is so much concerned about what's going on in Syria because they know who's behind that.
Yep.
China is concerned about that. Iran is concerned about that. These are huge concerns. They're not something that they can ignore, that they can diminish the importance of that. If Russia loses Iran, that's huge. That's I don't know if they can find, because the security of the Middle East, we don't have a big country such in Iran in the Middle East. We have two big players, Turkey and Iran, and the other states are not that much influential. How do you see the way that the Trump administration understands that?
I don't think they do. Again, they don't do history, and they don't do their enemies, in terms of understanding their motivations, being empathetic toward their interests. And even if they are enemies, even if they're existential enemies, you want to know what they're thinking and what their motivations are, what their capabilities are. I think we're looking at a situation where Russia will have no choice if the United States makes a major military move on Iran. And some of the reasons for that you've just hinted at. We're looking at first of all, remember that Iran is in Asia. Sometimes people look at me and say, Iran's not in Asia, they're in the Middle East. Oh, come on, dude. Iran is in Asia. It is a part of Asia. That's where the power's going. I think I've said this to you before. 1 in 5 is Chinese, 1 in 5 is Indian, 3 in 5 is Asian. And someone said to me the other day, and 4 in 5, including the Africans, is not from our hemisphere. They're right. 4/5 of the world's population is that way. That's where the power's going. That's where the power is right now. I don't think Xi Jinping even realizes just how much that is the case. I may be wrong. The Strategic Party School is very good at doing this sort of futuristic thinking. And they have probably concluded with some humility that, wow, what Deng Xiaoping set in motion has really worked. We talk about all the problems China has and so forth, and all the difficulties, the Potemkin villages and all that. Take a look at the United States of America recently. Whew, I wouldn't trade you in a heartbeat. China has far fewer problems, systemic problems for the future than we do. We propagandize the hell out of this story from China. If we are going to do what we should do, which is, as Chaz Freeman says all the time, contemplate and then accommodate this multinodal world, then we have to stop this arc of chaos we've created. We've got to stop Israel. We've got to get Israel out of Syria. We are doing this. This makes my point about, AIPAC be damned. Israel is our attack dog. more than anything that's happening right now. We have unleashed Israel on Syria. Netanyahu would not be doing in Syria. He killed 4 more people yesterday in Syria. He killed them in Syria. He would not be doing what he's doing in Syria. He would not be so far beyond his capacity and capabilities when he's so tied down in Gaza and on the West Bank and in Lebanon if the United States were not prodding him. He is doing our business in Syria. God forbid that he keeps on doing it, because if we don't watch out, we're going to wind up with a bigger a bigger portion of the Levant than we can handle, even through Netanyahu. And I think Netanyahu is going. I really do think he's short-lived now. Finally, he's short-lived. The Israelis are going to get rid of him. I don't know what's going to replace him. But this is all part of the warp and woof of our trying to stop this power shift. And I don't think Russia's going to have any choice. They want to be with the West. They want to be a part of a new security architecture in Europe. They want to be closer to the United States. They want to have good relations with both NATO, United States, whatever NATO is going to be. I think NATO's dead. I think it's finished. I've said that for a long time. But they're being compelled. And this is another strategic era on our part. Were we to go to war with Iran, were we to use significant force against Iran, even just round-the-clock aerial bombing to try and knock out their nuclear facilities, which we couldn't do, even if we did that, Russia would make a decision. And Putin would make that decision. The United States is untrustworthy. It's deceitful. It's shown it in Ukraine. It's now demonstrating it once again in the Levant. I'm making my decision. Xi Jinping, come visit Moscow. I'm with you. And now it takes on the overtone not of a multinodal world, but of a world where 4/5 of the world is poised and posed to destroy the empire.
Larry, you've mentioned the fight, the war between Iran and Iraq. And you said that in the United States, let them fight in each other. And this chaos would help us in a long run. Right now, it seems that they got a lot, they have been accustomed to the situation that they've been in, and they're part of the game right now. They're part of this chaos. They're just losing because of this chaos that they made in Ukraine, and right now in the middle, it's not just about Iran and Iraq fighting each other. It's the United States, one party in this conflict.
Yes.
And it's unbelievable to me, those people who were thinking that they're not part of the fight, they're helping these two parties fighting each other, but right now they're party to the game. Yeah. That's why they're...
And you know who's going to probably... You never know about these guys, and it is mostly all guys, but who's probably going to be the bellwether of this? The Saudis, because they are going to figure it out here sooner or later. And the Prince Bandar approach, as Powell used to call it, is not going to work anymore. Playing both sides against the middle and so forth. They're going to make a concrete decision to shift allegiance. That's going to be a real shock to Washington, because to lose the Saudis, however chimerical and detestable they might be from time to time, and I'm still of a mind that they were behind 9/11. Not necessarily all of them, but people like Turki Al-Faisal, Prince Bandar himself, and others, I think they knew 9/11 was happening. They might have even been plugged into that group of the clean break strategy type neocons, and they were talking with one another. But I'm sure the Saudis were in there. It'd be 100 years before we realize that, but in history. But when the Saudis decide to go the other way, that's when, fold the sails, because that will be the biggest indicator that the empire is expiring rapidly. But your description is a description of the strategic chaos that we have largely been responsible for.
Larry, do you think that the way that Donald Trump and his administration is feeling, they're feeling about Saudi Arabia, and when would be the moment that Saudi Arabia would change its direction? Because right now it doesn't seem to be we are getting to that moment. But
these kind of moments come on you with a rush. Everything seems fine on Monday, and on Tuesday the world has shifted and changed. The Saudis are very good at thinking about multiple options and even funding multiple options. And then at the last minute, shifting all their money to the potential winner that is, appeared to them to be that. Powell used to compare it to a horse race. Bet on all the horses, then cut it down to the 3, then cut it down to the 2, and then at the last minute, take all your money and put it on the winner. And you got to have great intelligence for that. And I would compare at one point there, Al Faisal's operation when he was head of intelligence with the Mossad, and maybe even better than the Mossad in some areas. So they will have that attuned to everything that's happening. And once Moscow and Beijing's offers are better than Washington's, and they're getting very close to that right now, including things like fighter aircraft and missiles. They're getting very close to that right now. They are highly competitive right now. They are going to be more than highly competitive. Plus the strategic vision of what's happening in the world and who is going to come out on the other side of that happening as the ultimate victor is going to grasp them. And their number one purpose in life, this is unmistakable purpose in life, is to survive intact as their monarchy. They will make deals with the devil to do that. And Mohammed bin Salman, while he might be interested in lots of economic things and so forth, in this Project 2025 of his, or whatever it is that he's doing, may seem an exception to that, but I don't think so in the long run. I think they've been very circumspect. The royal family has been very circumspect about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And their strategic acumen is still there. It's not quite as tested and as fine as the Chinese party school, the Central Party School. They're probably the greatest outside of Singapore. Singapore has the best strategic thinkers on the face of the earth. You might consider what it is to have 1.4 billion Chinese on top of you in order to come up with that kind of thinking. But Lee Kuan Yew, for example, used to talk about this with Henry Kissinger and others. He didn't brag about it, but I've seen and been amongst their strategists. They're very good. Saudis are pretty good too. And when they make the decision, they will make the decision. And it might coincide with, and they might want it to coincide with, a more insular empire. That is to say, what Trump was talking about, Fortress America, that we come home to the Western Hemisphere. That's one reason he's looking at Greenland, and he's looking at Panama, and he's looking at other things like that, because he's thinking, I think, and this is one of the places where I think he is thinking, about what it would be to have to defend the Western Hemisphere from all and sundry. And you need different dispositions to be able to do that. And maybe that's what he's thinking about ultimately, is Fortress America. That may be what we're forced into by economic, financial, and other realities, military realities. Wait until we find out. He's already closing bases, Nima. He's closing bases. I'm cheering. I'm clapping for him because he's closing bases. He's closing military installations. Go ahead, do that. If we come home from the war, more or less, 750 military installations, let's say we reduce it to 400 and then 300 or whatever, and we begin to come home a little bit. And at the same time, look at what we're doing on the old island chain in the Pacific. I don't know if you know about this, but we're Tinian and all the way up to Guam and down. We are refurbishing old World War II Air Force bases and other facilities, maintenance facilities and so forth. And this is all focused on China. This is all focused on China. The Marines are particularly involved in it. Marines on Okinawa, their whole mission in life now is China. The Marine Corps has been revolutionized. It's been changed to being a missile force, a rocket force that will go all over the place with little teams with rockets and missiles and fight China. Oh, man, I wouldn't want that mission. But a lot of old Marines think the Marine Corps is being ruined. It's becoming a second army, really. And why would we have it if it's a second army? All that to say that we could be building out to protect ourselves ultimately when it is truly the end of our time. And we're going to extend that end for a period by simply husbanding our forces and defending the Western Hemisphere against all and sundry. The strategic humor here, Nima, is there isn't all and sundry wanting to dominate us. That's we've created that. We've drawn that up in our heads. That's our image. We will fight. And people like John Mearsheimer have contributed to that by saying that it is inevitable. It is inevitable. Great power coming up, great power going down. There will be a war between the United States and China. I don't like that aspect of John Mearsheimer. I've had arguments with him about it. Lunch table, when we were creating the Quincy Institute, at lunch one day, why do you think it's inevitable? Well, it's inevitable because, the realist interpretation of history tells me it's inevitable. Okay, well, that would defy that to a certain extent because we would be at home, we'd be building walls, we'd be saying, to the rest of the world, be damned. We'd still be trading and everything. We'd have to. But that could be the future, that we're looking at a Fortress America, and Donald Trump intuits that. I don't know. Maybe he's got people around him who intuit that too. I don't think that's the right move, but it is one strategic choice that could be made. And that's when you will see Riyadh fast going to the other side. I don't think Riyadh will say, oh, we'll come to Washington with a team and we'll help you build out inside the Western Hemisphere. I just don't think that's in the works for the Arabs.
Yeah. Larry, here is one of our audience asked a question to you. Here is what he asked. Can you read the question?
Trump would
engage
a change in Brazilian actual government, take away Lula, and maybe replace him with Bolsonaro or another politician that they would consider more friendly to the USA. Well, Bolsonaro would certainly be more friendly to the United States in terms of the 5% of Brazil that's richer in crises would work with the 5% of the United States that's richer than crises to screw the Brazilian people. That's essentially the American way in South America, and we return to that. That's been defied in Bolivia. It's been defied in Ecuador. It's been defied to a certain extent in Argentina and Chile. And South Americans are adjusting to this defiance and adjusting to operating on their own, if you will, and trying to continue to conduct business with the giant up to the north, El Coloso del Norte, as the Cubans call it, but to take care of their own people at the same time. It's a fractious movement. It's difficult. It's hard. You get interim leaders like Bolsonaro who reverse everything that Lula's done, for example. But I think the trend is there, and the trend is going to grow as the United States becomes more insular. So it's good for the rest of the world that the empires might be becoming more insular. But to the specific question, yes, I think Bolsonaro would be more comfortable with Trump and Trump more comfortable with Bolsonaro than Lula, or a Lula-like replacement.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care of yourself. Let me know about Friday.
Yeah, I'll let you.
Take care.
Take care.